Well, good afternoon. How are we? Doing okay? After lunch? Well, welcome to this session. We're going to be talking about expanding your buy here, pay here operation through retail subprime. My name is Justin Osborne. I'm NABD's retail 20 group moderator and CMD instructor. Appreciate you guys coming. Welcome. We're going to go through talking. How many in here? I asked this question yesterday when we were talking about subprime. Raise your hand today if you are currently a buy here, pay here outfit that's not really doing any retail. And raise your hand if you're retail not doing any buy here, pay here. And then raise your hand if you're buy here, pay here and you're doing some retail, maybe some subprime. Okay, so good. Well, with that, I'm going to go through and we got a great panel here. We had an awesome session yesterday. Was anybody in the subprime products yesterday? Okay, got a couple. Great panel here. I'm going to let them introduce yourselves. Get your pencils sharp because they're going to lay out some awesome stuff in the next hour. It's going to be great. So, Chuck, we'll start with you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chuck Bonanno. I'm the National Director of 20 Groups Dealer Education and Training for NABD. With 31 years now in buy here, pay here. Been part of a publicly held buy here, pay here company. Have done several superstores in retail, both prime and subprime, and have managed franchise stores. So hopefully I can give you some information today.
Good afternoon. My name's Joe McCloskey. I'm from Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've been in the car business for about 47 years, believe it or not. It started out about 5 years old. But anyway, we've been in business. This is our 30th year being in business with McCloskey Motors, Colorado Springs. Started out as buy here, pay here, then started migrating and going to buy here, pay here, subprime, then became a very strong subprime dealer carrying still buy here, pay here. This is all under one roof. Picked up a couple new car franchises along the way and ran new car franchises, prime, subprime, and buy here, pay here all under one roof. Just humbly, we're a two-time Colorado Quality Dealer of the Year, was recently a NABD's National Quality Dealer of the Year, and I also serve on the NABD Executive Board for the Western Region, Vice President.
Hi, I'm Dave Keller. I'm with Clifton Larson Allen CPAs. We specialize in, our division of dealership specializes in car dealerships. We have about 750 dealerships nationwide. New, used, buy here, pay here, heavy truck, utility trailers, RVs, utility, sports, just about anything has wheels we're take care of. I spend all my time consulting with buy here, pay here, and new car dealers and used car dealers across the country, and just their operations and financing. I do a lot of buy sells with new car dealers. I come from a dealership background. My dad was a used car dealer for 20 years, so I grew up in that business. And in '92, he bought a new car store, a GM Chrysler dealership, which we still own, and my older brother operates that. So I try to work both sides of the game. Kind of like I work Joe's side as from the dealership side, but also from a CPA side, trying to advise dealers of how to help operate their business a little bit better and make more money.
Awesome. So we're going to dive right in and we're going to begin to talk about a few reasons or some different angles that you may be thinking about how to expand from your buy here, pay here operation into subprime. And we're going to unpack a couple of those issues. And we're going to start with Chuck. Chuck, if you could kind of start to outline, a few things that a buy here, pay here dealer may want to consider when they're thinking about subprime, specifically maybe cash flow or customer retention.
So I know some of you guys are doing subprime now. The guys who did subprime and buy here, pay here, did you do subprime first or did you do buy here, pay here first? Buy here, pay here. So you've already started to go into a subprime market because I deal with dealers in my 20 groups and through consulting all the time who go upstream, they go downstream, they go sideways. The most practical reason of all, I would say, to do a retail business associated with your buy here, pay here business is buy here, pay here is extremely capital intensive, as you all are finding out or already know. And a retail business is cash today or tomorrow when you get your funding, but it can really increase your cash flow. And I would say help fund your buy here, pay here habit, right? The second thing is, and I don't want to steal a lot of Joe's thunder because he's done it all, is in a world that subprime and even deep subprime customer and you guys are, if you're reporting to the Bureau, you're graduating your customers if you don't know it. So one of the things I think is really important is having a place for your good customers as they pay off their buy here, pay here loans, a place for them to go.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to speak to that point?
Yeah, just if you're thinking about this, where you're currently doing buy here, pay here, and you're thinking about doing subprime or maybe growing your subprime business, if you take a look at it, if you do about an average of 10 subprime deals a month, your average gross profit on a subprime deal should be between $3,500 and $4,000 gross profit, both front and back. So doing 10 deals a month, in a year's time, you'll make somewhere right around about $200,000 to $300,000 after-tax income. That's positive cash flow into your dealership. Then over a period of 4 years, that could be over $1 million in additional cash flow to either better fund your buy here, pay here, or to purchase more additional inventory. The other thing that I think is real important, this is my belief, and I understand people that want to stay as buy here, pay here, or stay as subprime or prime. But the one thing is that the buy here, pay here is a great entry-level way of keeping your customers and maybe growing with the customers and keeping up with their families and all. But the one thing that'll happen is the longer customers are buy here, pay here customer, their credit starts improving because of your coaching and your hard work as a buy here, pay here dealer. We're training them on how to make payments. So that means their credit score goes up. And we've all seen in the past several years where if we don't upgrade that customer into a subprime and then ultimately a prime financing vehicle, then somebody else will. Your competition will take care of that for you. So that's why I think it's real important to do. I always said, you know, I'm from Colorado and we believe in growing our own. Come on. If you, it's true. So you can grow your customers buy here, pay here, up through the subprime and on up into the prime, and truly service them and their families for a lifetime.
Well, and to unpack that a little further, looking at buy here, pay here, going into or expanding into subprime retail, we also get into the price conversation, pricing vehicles, because if you're a buy here, pay here, and you're wanting to expand into subprime on the same location or on the same lot, there immediately becomes a challenge with how you price. A lot of dealers are pricing online, on the website. A lot of that's a race to the bottom. And if you're trying to hold gross for your buy here, pay here customers, that can be a challenge. So Joe, could you speak to that point a little bit as far as pricing vehicles? I know you've done both sides.
Well, for us, we do not price our vehicles, whether it be subprime, prime, or what we would call our buy here, pay here vehicles online. We do probably about 20% of our inventory, which is maybe our aging inventory. But we do have our vehicles pre-priced. We give the salespeople a list, and they can only quote those prices off of their list. And that consistent pre-pricing prevents allegations of discrimination or mishandling the customer. There's kind of like a phenomena out there that you've got to have your vehicles priced online for better ranking and better recognition. When everybody else, my belief is when everybody else zigs, I zag. So I go the different direction, which means that I don't have vehicles priced online. And we found that that elicits and generates a lot of additional phone calls. And the question is, what's the price on a car, right? Which we handle that with the customer. We try to bypass their objection on the price. What's the price? What's the price? Try and set the appointment to get the customer in. If they don't, we tell them what the price of the vehicle is. If they say, well, geez, that's real high, then we tell them that we've never lost a deal based upon price alone. Let's get you in, take a look at the vehicle, and then we'll move on from there. So we don't make a big deal out of it, but compare that to if the vehicle was listed online, and say if we were at $16,995 for the price of our car and somebody else was $15,900. I never get a swing at that customer because of the fact that they just go to that next $14,995 car, and I never even knew they were there. At least we get a swing at the bat with them if they call in and they say, what's the price of the vehicle?
Yeah, and Joe may be the anomaly or the exception to the rule with most retailers now do price online. Chuck, could you speak a little bit to pricing? Because I know that in your experience, you've seen that from the buy here, pay here side of the house, what obstacles there could be trying to move into the retail side?
Well, one of the challenges that becomes not only the philosophy change of pricing your cars online or window stickers on your car, that's a marketing decision that you make, and it's, you know, I've watched very successful dealers do that the same way. But the one thing that happens when you're going to do subprime and buy here, pay here is you have to be cautious and cognizant of the fact that you can't price your cars two ways. We can't have a finance price and a retail price because that will imply that you have a finance charge built in for your own financing. So you're going to have to make that decision. And I think in Joe's case, I've known Joe for a long time, is he's going to say, you know, I'm going to step up and put a price on that car that's going to make me a lot of money no matter how it's financed. And then we can negotiate down. But you got to keep that in mind that in buy here, pay here, you can't say, well, that car's $10,995 cash or outside finance and it's $15,995 in-house. Can't do it.
Right. So we price our cars up enough to, the typical discount fee is anywhere from $500 to maybe $1,200. And keep in mind, we don't consider CAC, which we do use CAC or Westlake. We don't consider that. We consider that more in that buy here, pay here category. If CAC is going to buy the deal, typically I'm going to buy the deal in-house as a buy here, pay here dealer. So that category of CAC with those heavy discounts is in that buy here, pay here category. Above that, you're talking about your subprime lenders. We price our cars up high enough, and we're proud of the price, and it's amazing. The more that they market that consumers are so price conscious, we're finding that actually the opposite is true. They're more concerned about how they're being treated, the condition of the vehicle, the reputation of the dealership, what happens after the sale, and like there. And I think, Dave, you, with your dealerships, you know, you probably have seen that as well, that they're not as hyper price sensitive, right?
Right. I mean, people come in and want to know the price, but they're probably more worried about what their payment's going to be,
Right.
and what their down payment cash out of pocket is going to be than anything else. The price of the car is really irrelevant if they can't afford the payment. So the payment can be structured enough by stretching out the term or whatever you need to do, or adding or subtracting different F&I products to get the thing where they can actually afford it, just like a buy here, pay here customer would.
Boy, that's true.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we take an opportunity to pause as we unpack some of these things to field any questions you have. So does anybody have a question in regards to price?
I have a question in regards to the comment that you just made about term. Do you notice a big difference in term between what you do buy here, pay here, and what you're giving out to your finance company and stuff?
Oh yeah, term would go to 72 months on the cars,
Yeah.
on retail deals.
You can get up to not to
84,
contradict, you
yeah.
can get up to 84 months
Yeah.
but typical term is 72, as Dave said.
What are you trying to do in house, like 36, 42?
The benchmark is 42.6 months in buy here, pay here. With typical, well, I have a few outlier, high-end buy here, pay here companies, but most of them are not above 48.
Question here?
Will you sell the same vehicle, subprime retail and buy here, pay here, and therefore you've got one price that you potentially can finance it one way or the other? Or do you separate inventory and that this inventory is available for subprime retail, this inventory is available for buy here, pay here?
Can I ask you a huge favor? Could you use the microphone? Because I think you asked a really good question, and it'd take me too long to repeat it.
All right. So do you separate your inventory? Some inventory is available for subprime retail, some's available for buy here, pay here, or is all inventory priced in the same manner and it just depends on the customer as to whether or not they qualify for subprime retail or buy here, pay here? Or do you have to select inventory that fits each?
That's a really good question. We price all the vehicles so that they can handle the subprime or the buy here, pay here. Typically what happens is we do have them segmented in groups, and so if a customer comes in and they qualify for the buy here, pay here typical car, then we'll take them over, show them, and they say, well, what about that nicer, newer vehicle over there? I would like to get it. then we'll tell them, well, you can certainly get that vehicle. It takes about additional $5,000 down. How can we come up with that kind of money? Oh, heck, I can't come up with that. Okay, well, great. These group of cars over here do qualify for your $500 or $800 down, and let's select one of those. We just keep going. If we have a subprime customer that says, well, I'd like to really get one of those vehicles over there, certainly we'd put a subprime customer credit worthiness in the subprime. We'd put them on the books and carry them. But we would tell that subprime customer, well, look, your credit has grown. You've really demonstrated the ability to pay. And so now you can move into the nicer, newer vehicle. Let's see what's available to you, that a vehicle you may have never considered before. And usually as we're walking them through, they're going, oh, yeah, this is really nice. And because they get sold on maybe that nicer pickup or nicer vehicle.
Yes, sir. What about the cash customer in that scenario?
He was talking about buy here, pay here, subprime. Where does the cash customer fit in on that price?
That's a really good question also. What happens at that point, they say, well, what's the cash price on a lot? The salespeople are not able to quote cash prices on a lot or negotiate on a lot. What they tell the customer is, look, we've never lost a deal based upon price alone. Let's make sure this is the vehicle that you're looking for and that you do want to own. And then let's take it for a test drive. If you like the vehicle, then we'll get with my manager and get your price on the vehicle. So then the manager proceeds from that point.
And Chuck, to that point, that's best practice. But can you attest to in your experience working with buy here, pay here dealers over the years, maybe some secret shops that have been done, how effective we are at training that to where when we get salespeople on the phone, they're adhering to that, and how risky is that? How dangerous is that?
And thank you, Justin. I don't really care what your model is, and I've known Joe's been in one of my 20 groups for quite a long time, and he really is process driven, and to the point that we call him the Godfather. But we do secret shops. I've called lots of your salesmen before and asked them if they can give me a cash price on a car I saw on the website. And it's almost without fail that they roll off some silly price. They have a cash price, which we've trained them or allegedly trained them that we don't give out the price out there. And so part of that comes from training, and part of that comes from having a script or word track that overcomes that objection. I've told people who say, well, how much down? I said, well, we work with as little as zero down. We try to make sure that no matter what they're thinking about, we've got a way to make it happen. Come on in, let's set that appointment, let's get you in, and let's look at some cars.
Any other questions before we move on? Yes. Thank you we have all this extra noise. It's free. We didn't have to pay for that.
In case you were thinking about being at the dentist today, you get that experience.
Okay, so the challenge that we're having is nobody wants to pay, okay? So the subprime, they don't want to pay enough. So it's just easier for me just to put it on my books, and then I get all the money. So the only real outside financing that we're doing anything with is credit union.
Right.
So like CNAC and all that stuff, they don't want to pay, so I'll just keep them on my books. What other people do you have on your, I'm sure you're using like Dealer Track?
Yes.
To put them in, that's what we do.
Right.
What other companies do you have on there that seem to be working for you?
That's a really good question. Well, most people think of subprime lenders as maybe, again, Westlake, CAC. Those are buy here, pay here, my opinion. You bring up a really good point. What I would do is I would sign up CUDL, which stands for Credit Union Direct Lending, CUDC, which is Credit Union Direct Connect. Those have monthly fees, gives you access to multiples of credit unions. And you'll find that credit unions actually do loan money to subprime customers. And actually, as part of their charters, they need to service the community. So they need to demonstrate that they do provide financing for some lower income, lower credit score people. So that's a really good start. The other ones that are strong players in the market are AmeriCredit, Flagship, Prestige Financial, and Capital One. Capital One, you need to be in business a minimum of 5 years. And again, with each one of these lenders, I wouldn't get a huge arsenal of lenders, because subprime lenders, because they are looking for volume from a dealer. And you've got to be able to produce at least 10, 15, 20 deals a month for them, but 10 is fine. Most of them would be acceptable to that. And so does that answer your question? Okay.
And to that point, surprisingly, just last year, you may or may not know this, credit unions were ranked in the top 3 market share in subprime and deep subprime. So credit unions have been really good in that space recently. Any other questions about pricing before we move on? Dave, switching gears a little bit, talking about accounting, what accounting mistakes can be made, whether in the accounting office or operationally, when a buy here, pay here dealer is considering moving into the subprime or retail space?
Well, some of the things that we see that dealers aren't structured for is their chart of accounts and their general ledger and everything like that is set up just to do buy here, pay here. They don't really have sales accounts and cost of sale accounts. They don't really have a separate inventory account maybe for the subprime inventory versus the buy here, pay here inventory. They need separate receivable accounts because you need a contract in transit, which is due from a bank. You need maybe a separate vehicle receivable for the down payments you're going to get, which are separated from maybe your deferred down payments or your pickup payments that you may have on a buy here, pay here store. So what we normally see is we try to get these extra accounts set up on the balance sheet and the liability side. Maybe a separate floor plan liability account for that retail inventory versus a subprime line of credit, the buy here, pay here line of credit you may have to fund that inventory. That may be part of your RFC line of credit. We also make sure you maybe have some separate expense accounts. You have to have a separate income accounts for the finance and insurance income accounts, the chargebacks that are related to those accounts, and then what we also want to see is a whole different commission structure for your salespeople on a retail deal most time than on a buy here, pay here deal. So we want to see those separate expenses geared towards just those retail deals so we can see what our true net gross profit is after our selling expenses. The other thing we want to see is there's certain fixed expenses you may want to worry about too, and that is there's certain fixed, selling expenses too, but you may want to separate your advertising expense so you can see if you're trying to get into this business, make it almost like a department of your dealership basically, so you can see if it really is going to produce a gross profit like Joe was saying per year. That way you can see if it does make sense to stay in it or if your expenses are overcoming the gross profit that you are achieving.
Joe, back to you. You've already talked about a few advantages that you've experienced moving from buy here, pay here into the subprime and retail space. But can you speak to any thing in that move or that transition that may be unattractive or some pitfalls to be aware of?
The pitfalls, I would say, certainly you have an increased cost of inventory because you're going to be carrying a little bit nicer, newer vehicle and securing those floor plan lines, whether you're going to be using one of the auction floor plans or your local bank as well. Again, I wouldn't necessarily go out and purchase 20 or 30, 40, 50. I would start out with 10 and makes really good buys, which I'll talk about in a minute what that looks like. The other thing that I think the biggest thing you've got to work on after you secure either dealer financing portals such as DealerTrack or Route 1, I would then, one of the big things I would do is sign up to lenders. Then I would interview the lenders, which is another segment that we will be talking about, but really interview the lenders to really learn what it is that they're looking for. And then on top of that is teach your managers how, and you could send them to a fellow subprime dealer. There's many different ways that you could get that education, but training your desk managers on how to desk a subprime deal, what to look for, how to recognize a subprime deal, how to structure the subprime deal, because there are ways to get approvals that may not be a typical way to get it approved. Do you want me to address that real quick?
Sure, yeah,
it takes
absolutely.
just a second. So what I'm talking about there is that whether you're with a credit union, or you're using a finance company or a bank, when you're submitting a deal through Dealer Track or Route 1, and I talked about this yesterday, you want to submit the deal. These are all automated approvals. And you want to submit the deal, a subprime deal, so that it gets automatically approved. So that it automatically gets approved. You're telling the computer this is exactly how, or you're telling them exactly what they want to hear. Then once you get the approval, you can then call the buyer and then say, oh, by the way, here's the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. They don't necessarily have $5,000 down, they have $1,500 down, and instead of looking at the 2015 Honda Accord, they're looking at the 2010 Hyundai Elantra. And then once you get that approval, you can go through it and work that deal, which they're accustomed to do, and they actually want you to do that. So there's some tricks of the trade that you'd want to get them involved with. Also how to process the paperwork through those lenders and get through their underwriting guidelines, not necessarily yours because you're used to your own in-house. You will find that those mirror each other because if you're really prudent and very serious about buy here, pay here, and that means you're a stickler for your own underwriting, complete credit applications, proof of all the steps, verifying residences, those types of things, verifying incomes, that those same things are the ones that the subprime lenders are looking for. So that won't necessarily change. It's more the mechanism of uploading those to their websites and through Dealer Track to get your funding and get your approvals and your funding.
I'd like to add something. Joe, do you find that, so talking to a lot of my new car dealers and subprime dealers, it seems like certain lenders like certain model cars?
Oh, yes.
So when you interview the lender, you actually want to sit there and find out what are your top 10 cars you will lend on and feel comfortable with. You want to expand on that a little, Joe? Right,
and that's why I used the word Honda. We have several subprime lenders seem to be in love with Hondas, not necessarily with Hyundais. They both begin with the H. I don't know what their differences are, but what Dave is saying is absolutely true. That's why I'm saying you want to submit the deal with so that it will get approved and then work with the lender on that. The other thing that just taking a little bit deeper dive if we can on the lender side of it is when I'm saying interview the lenders is really find out what is their customer and what they're looking for. So many of the lenders do have what's called a look to book. How many deals are you submitting to them and how many do end up actually getting an approval? And of those approvals, how many do they actually see? Those are the metrics that you're judged by as a subprime dealer. So if they approve the deal, then you want to make sure that they get the deal and you just don't keep shopping along. That's very important to them. But finding out who their customer is that they're looking for, because some are looking for, surprisingly, you'd think a little bit better credit score. Some prefer maybe like AmeriCredit wants a 525 to a 541 is their sweet spot on a credit score. If you go to Capital One, that starts off at about 575 is where they start growing from there. So if you're submitting Capital One a 540, you kind of shot yourself in the foot. And vice versa. If you send AmeriCredit a 600 credit score, it's an automatic denial, and that affects your look to book. So knowing what that is. And one question that very few dealers ask a subprime lender is what is their, we've all heard of unique selling propositions, right? Whenever I saw a guy in here the other day with a 99 light green hat, that's his unique selling proposition. Probably 99 down, 99 a month or whatever. But you got to ask the lender, what is their unique lending proposition? What is it that they do differently than the other subprime lenders? And they'll tell you what they're looking for. And for example, if you're dealing with Cap One, what's unique about Capital One is not only their advance, and they have a Navigator, which is a mobile app, which you can communicate and work your own deal and get your own approvals, which is actually, you can actually grow your gross profit through that application. But the one thing about Capital One is they do not take into account residency or rent as part of the debt to income. So it's a little unique thing that they have going on. So if you have somebody that's in a high debt to income, you know automatically to flip that into Capital One and get your immediate approval and then move on. So those are the things that you want to pay attention to.
You know, I'd like to speak to that for just a minute because I know in retail 20 groups, we do something called hot topics in a 20 group. And if anybody in here in a 20 group, you want to raise your hand? Got a couple? So in a 20 group, we do hot topics, and that's where the dealers get an opportunity to bring up anything that's not on the agenda that they want to talk about while they're there. And the number one hot topic that comes up in a retail, which is subprime and prime mostly, for the retail guys is lenders. They want more, they need more lenders. Which lenders can we use? Which ones are buying? Where are they buying at? What credit tiers? This is a very hot topic with lenders right now. It has been for a couple of years. But the one thing I wanted to mention to that is you don't want to be so quick just to sign up some lenders. And to Joe's point, you know, these questions that he's laying out for you are great for you to interview that lender to make sure you understand when you exercise that lending agreement that you're bringing on a lender that's actually going to add value to what you're trying to accomplish in that subprime market. So, Chuck, do you have something to say?
Well, yeah, and I probably hadn't said this before, but one of my 20 groups that I moderate is indirect lenders. So it's purely a finance group, and they are small, regional, subprime type lenders. And then what's interesting is a lot of times they'll come by with their dealer reps, and they'll come out there and they'll say, here's our program, and they'll give you a 3-tier program, and it's all car-based, down payment-based, but it's not the customer profile in there. But I can assure you it's actually in our composite that we do look to books. And we're talking about, you know, I said, one of the guys, I said, how many dealers do you have? He goes, active? I go, give me both numbers. He goes, well, we have 474 dealers in Indiana and Ohio, and 12 give us deals. And so they know that, they care about that because it's a very expensive proposition to get no deals from you. So to Joe's point is the urge to shotgun deals is always there and just see who responds quickly. But to Joe's point is most of them would say, look, if we don't fit, I mean, my lenders will tell me, if they don't fit our program, don't send it to us. Right?
Any questions about the last couple of topics we talked about? Structuring deals, penciling deals, signing up lenders. Can I convince you to? Thank you very much.
You may talk about this, but I know nothing about subprime retail. So let's say a lender approves a deal for a certain amount of money. Talk to me about how you then, let's say we'll advance $10,000 on whatever the car is worth. But then you want to add additional products to that, F&I products. Will they just automatically lend on those two? How does that work?
Yes,
so
no, and maybe.
I know you were going to talk about F&I, but how do you add the F&I products after they've approved a deal?
That's a really good question. So one of the things that you want to do is train your managers on how to read a lender callback sheet. And a lender callback sheet has many different nuances. Each lender's is different. And some will be very explanatory. The other ones are just very short and brief, and you're supposed to know their programs. And sometimes we've got to educate the lenders on what their programs are. So typically what will happen is that the callback sheet will come back and say, depending upon how it's worded, but it'll say 110% approved, 110% of NADA. This is regardless of how you send it in. They'll say 110% of NADA or Kelly, depending upon the lender. You got to know which lenders do NADA and Kelly. And then it'll say plus add-ons. Now some allow plus tax, dealer handling, title fees. That's usually pretty standard. One way that you want to do, really take a look at is what you're charging for D&H and make sure that it's enough, because you want to be at about the maximum of what the subprime lenders are willing to advance. And to Chuck's point, that has to be consistent with your buy here, pay here as well. And then the add-ons. So the add-ons would be you'll need to go to their lender guidelines, and their lender guidelines will say that approved at $2,400, they'll go up to $2,400 on an extended service contract, plus gap, which is in our state is regulated. So it's either $195 or 2% of the amount financed. So there, they don't need to really delineate exactly how much it is because it's regulated. And then it'll say plus maybe 500, you'll have up to 500 additional in add-ons. Typically, or it'll say plus 4,000, or it'll say you'll be at about 130% out the door, meaning that the amount financed cannot be greater than 130% of NADA or wholesale or retail, depending upon the lender, or Kelly book. So, and you've got to include all of your finance products that are within that and all your add-ons and gross profit. So typically, and then some of the finance products are what's called a line one call, which are like such things as maybe etch. Those are added to the selling price of the vehicle. So even though you're selling a car at $11,995, then you can add etch on top of that, which is a theft reimbursement product. Most of them are after line 5, we call them line 6, line 7 calls. Typically is what we're talking about. Those are ones where you can add on to finance products. Does that explain? If all they're going to do is do 110% of NADA, and they'll say line 5. Line 5 means, and it's just jargon. You get used to it. All this, really, at the end of the day, a lot of it may seem mysterious and maybe a lot of work, and you're talking about setting up your books. All you do is just call your CPA and tell them what you're going to do. If you have an excellent CPA like Dave Keller, or even a moderate one, but they'll be able to set up the books for you. And so that's a no-brainer. The rest of the stuff, just start. I promise you, the buy here, pay here business is much more complex than the subprime. The buy here, pay here is like getting a doctorate in the car business. I mean, you're doing everything to A to Z. At the end of the day, you just figure out how this combination works. And the beauty of it is that once that deal gets funded by the lender, which is usually within 24 hours of submitting the deal, you get your money, and it's ching in the cash register. Cash drawer opens up, you stick the money in cash drawer, shut it, and then you go on to the next car deal. So, and then you're done. You don't have to keep servicing the account. Does that make sense? So I would start working with it. Another thing you could do, sorry to keep interrupting here, give me a microphone and pretty soon I'll start singing Moon River. But
Don't let him do it.
Yeah, but the other thing I would do is go visit a subprime dealer. And you're welcome to come to our store. There's many stores in your state. We all know guys at the auctions are doing subprime. Say, hey, listen, can I come and spend a day with you? Bring your managers along, and that will really help advance it very quickly for you.
Yeah, one thing on lenders that we see a lot of in our new car dealerships and our subprime used car dealerships is the lender really, based upon how bad they want a deal, is how much of a fee they may charge you to buy that deal. I'm not sure if you've seen a lot of that, Joe. Where the lender will jump in and out of the market because he took a lot of hits last month on repos, just like maybe you did. So he jumps back, is a little bit more conservative on buying deals that next month. So don't let that scare you off because they'll jump right back in as soon as they get over that repo stage, just like you do. And the fees will go up and down. I think from what some of my dealers are telling me, they're going to go up and down based upon how hungry they are for that deal.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to one thing to Joe and Steve's question about the F&I products out there. We have seen somewhat of a shift, and it's cyclical, like buy here, pay here, in all of what we do, is that it seems to me that the lenders are allowing more back end and tightening up on the front end. And so if you're just going to hope you're going to do really well with the front end gross profit, I think that's what you were talking about, that I can't make any money when they do that. It's because they're allowing more F&I products to be sold and added on and funded. And right now they like them because they're cancelable and they can charge you back for them. So they can get back if that deal doesn't work out. With the gross profit, they own it.
Yeah, that's a good segue at our next topic about personnel and F&I office. And, you know, when you have the difference between a buy here, pay here deal and a retail deal, just because we didn't really necessarily break that down, on the back end, you're obviously able to sell and make gross profit on reserve and rate, like what Joe was talking about, extended service contracts, gap policies, third-party ancillary products. And you can also reinsure that, which looks and feels a little different. And if we have time, we may circle back and talk about, I was just talking to a dealer in the dealer lounge. It was a retail dealer dabbling in buy here, pay here, kind of the reverse of what we got in this room, and has a reinsurance company set up on the buy here, pay here side, but didn't know what that looked like for the retail side. So we may circle back there. But Chuck, let's talk about personnel for a minute, F&I departments, because for the buy here, pay here department, really you don't have an F&I.
Do any of you buy here, pay here, pure buy here, pay here dealers have an F&I manager? Well, what are they selling?
We got a big F&I. We got two ladies and a couple part-time girls, and they're the ones that are actually approving, they pull all the apps, approving the deals, scoring them with the system, and then actually close them.
Okay, so I would call that an underwriter. Okay, yeah, and not truly an F&I, because of what a lot of buy here, pay here dealers have figured out is, yes, own a reinsurance company, have warranties on the cars versus service contracts, and the reason you want to go that route versus the service contract is if I'm going to service this note for 36 or 48 months, why do I want any customer out there without some kind of vehicle protection, right? And GAP kind of goes without saying. So most of my dealers who have used GAP products from the outside world, they are almost all cut off by the GAP companies. I would say, what does that mean? It means you won. Because GAP products are really challenging at buy here, pay here levels, but if you have a good customer in buy here, pay here who's paying you beautifully, and you get a payoff check from an insurance company, it doesn't cover the whole amount, your best bet's to write it off, take the tax liability that you've diminished there, and put them in another car. Now, in the retail world, the banks really like GAP insurance, because what percent of people do you believe are upside down in their cars, in their car loans?
100%.
Somewhere around 100.
I have to agree with that, yeah.
So we're typically not selling F&I products, and if that becomes, and Joe, I don't know if I recall your numbers, but for most of our dealers in our retail groups, the front end profit may represent 60 to 70% of the whole profits, and somewhere between 30 and 40 is back end. You can't leave that on the table. So you better have somebody, whether it's your desk manager, whether it's your GM, or whether you're going to get somebody trained, and there's lots of ways to get F&I people trained. But it's a selling process just like the sales on the lot with the car.
Yeah, and I want to pause here and kind of spend a little bit more time thinking this through, because it really is night and day in the F&I department, in a buy here, pay here, on a retail side. And Joe, you might be able to speak to this when you're looking at doing subprime. If you're unfamiliar with the backside of it, if you don't have relationship with lenders, and you've decided you want to bring on an F&I person, that's a critical position. So, Joe, could you speak a little bit more to that about how critical that position is to be successful on the subprime side?
Well, it depends upon your volume of your store that you do in subprime, but typically the finance manager is the highest gross profit generating individual in any dealership. And they get paid very well, but they make an awful lot of money. Again, so resorting back, well, if you're asking yourself, if I'm going to be starting out with maybe hopefully selling 10 per month, start baby steps is what I would do. How do I proceed from there? Well, one thing I would try and do, again, is either recruit somebody with some F&I experience. There's a lot of people that talk like John Wayne but don't walk like him. And so you've got to really decide, okay, if you're not going to be expanding and hiring another manager, then you want to maybe look at immersing them in another dealership. Take one of your managers, your key person that's really good at the paperwork, and go to your 20 group members, get a hold of Chuck. Again, there's other dealers where you could send them. We all have friends that's what I love about being an independent dealer. We all have friends that we know somebody who knows somebody. Send them to spend a week inside of another store, subprime store, and they'll train them and educate them, and when they come back to you, they'll be up and running.
So I'm going to embarrass you, but I have a small dealer in Virginia who does half buy here, pay here, and half subprime, who went to see the empire of McCloskey Motors, okay? which, I mean, this is night and day businesses, just so you know, right? He's a really great guy. He said, you know, I'm going to go see how Joe does it in his 20 group. Spend a few days with you, and of course, like typical 20 group members, gracious as they can be, I'll show you everything and anything. And he went back to a small dealership. I think he's 30 a month, 35 a month.
Yeah, 30.
Right? 30 a month deal. And he more than doubled his back-end F&I products almost immediately.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it's a cheaper route than making a hiring mistake or adding a new person.
A lot of cowboys.
It's really a good point, Joe.
And he did that with the same managers, actually, and not to contradict you, but he actually quadrupled.
I didn't want to oversell them. I didn't think they'd believe me.
Yeah,
So he went from $1 to $4. No, I'm kidding. But he did it, and that's what I'm trying to say to you is that it's not rocket science. And once you get somebody who understands it, you go, oh, so this is what it's about. And
most of our dealers use a menu system to sell, so it's consistent. If you don't use a menu system, your F&I manager is going to decide in his mind what that customer needs or doesn't need, and he doesn't really interview the customer. If you go through every product and offer every customer every product, you're probably going to sell some products you never thought you were going to sell because you don't know what their triggers are. Mm-hmm. Is that correct, Joe?
Right. And to keep in mind, all of these products help the customer. We all know about extended service plans. Some of the other F&I products, we talked about GAP. Your ancillary products would be tire and wheel, windshield, lost key replacement. So in Colorado, we have a statement saying that there's two types of windshields, one that's broken and one you just replaced. It's because we have so many rocks on the road. But in the lost keys, we all know what key transponders cost, to replace or whatever. And typically when we're selling these cars, they get just one key. So lost key replacement really benefits the customer. So each one of these products, it's not like snake oil. Every one of them truly have a benefit to the consumer, and they're very easy to sell as well. Just as long as it falls into what Dave's talking about, which is what's my payment, and it does need to meet the payment to income requirements as set by the subprime lender as well.
Just pause for a minute for any questions. Any questions about F&I departments, F&I managers selling product? Sir.
I sell GAP and service plans. I don't add to, I do it weekly, but I don't add to the amount they spend. It just extends the agreement terms. Is that a bad practice, or should I be trying to get an extra $10 a week for the additional products? Does that make sense?
Are you saying you don't mark up the service contracts you're selling?
Yeah, I mark them up, put them in the deal, but I don't increase the payment.
This is in your captive paper? Your buy here, pay here paper versus your buy here, pay here. Okay. Yeah. So like everything else, that has to be the tolerance of the consumer to add. It sounds crazy that, in the retail world with prime customers, they walk in thinking they're paying $375 a month and they're just excited as could be walking out at $580. But they can do it. You have to be cautious and cognizant of the fact that you don't want to push them over the financial edge. And I would tell you, though, that a lot of our customers, if you guys have ever looked at, this is a buy here, pay here kind of discussion, but if you've ever looked at your repo curves, and meaning when do they charge off, not just how often and how much does it cost, you'll find that adding a month is, if it's month 41 or adding a month and it's month 43, if they made 41 out of 42 or 42 out of 43, we're probably in really good shape. Yeah.
Any other questions about F&I?
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to caution you guys about is, and I think you need to really consider this is, and Joe, I don't even know what yours is, but a lot of our retail dealers will have a 3-month, 3,000-mile, or a 30-day warranty. It comes with every car, cash, price, everything, and they use sell service contracts. Now, the challenge becomes now if you have a buy here, pay, all your buy here, pay here's have warranties, but your other cars don't. It's a compliance issue. So you might say, like, you know what, we're going to go down the service contract route for everybody. And it should be, I don't know, a service contract on a used car has to be the easiest sale I can even think of.
Yes.
Truly, and again, if you're selling cars that don't have any factory warranty left into them, you just can scare the bejesus out of them about what one motor or one tranny costs.
Yeah, you don't even have to scare them. All you do is just show them a part. Forgive me, can I touch this thing? I'm going to do it anyway. But you could just point to them, say, you see what this is? It's a ECM or BCM, and do you know what this costs? And they'll say, well, what's a ECM? Well, it's electronic control module. And we tell our customers it's not necessarily the mechanical part, because the cars are built so well. It's not engines and transmissions. It's usually what costs a lot of money are the electronics on a car. Especially when they say, well, I have a friend that's a mechanic. Well, can they diagnose electronic components? So it's usually a very good transition, and people are pretty conscious of that now because they know what it takes to repair a vehicle.
So, oh, in the back, yeah.
2 questions. Do you have a reinsurance company?
Me?
Yes.
Yes, I've had one for many years, several decades.
So
I'm that old.
it's your service contract that you're selling at retail? Like to retail customers?
Yes?
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those lenders that allow yours.
Well, every one of our lenders approve.
But not all lenders do. Right.
So you'd want to make all subprime lenders, if you go with more of a name brand reinsurance company, one that's been around, there's many that are here, Warrantech, Buckeye, those types of people, the lenders will provide or allow those to be part of their reinstallment contract. So
There are a few lenders who have their own and want you to use their product. That's all we want to tell you about.
Well, any other questions so far? We talked a little bit about the differences with F&I, and Joe, I'll tee another one up here for you. What about overall personnel? So you're a buy here, pay here. You've been running buy here, pay here for quite some time. You got that kind of dialed in. You feel like you got the right head count. Now you're wanting to expand into subprime. How do you take your current team and put your toe in the water or move into subprime? Do you have to go out and hire a new staff? Do you have to do new training? How do you make that transition? Again,
I'm a big stickler about expense, so I wouldn't go out. I would train the existing staff that you have. And again, this is not going into 2 separate companies. What you're doing is taking your existing model and then bolting on a new component to it. So doing what you're doing, but you're now adding another floor or another element to help migrate your customers on up the ladder. So if anything, this will really help. In our stores, we sell the future, and salespeople really like it because they can help grow their customers and start them out, buy here, pay here, and they can see them migrating on up through and keeping the customer truly for life. And helping people, and that's a really big thing, is that we really do help people, and we help. Best way to do that is through their credit scores. So again, that all falls back to the management, making sure that your managers know how to do it, because they'll help dictate whether this is a subprime customer or buy here, pay here customer. And then the only other thing would be and Dave could address this, would be your accounting staff, just so that they're set up with their computer systems and understand the accounting of that. And Dave, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the accounting systems that are used for retail are structured a lot different, because you may have packs in there. You may have a commissionable pack you're putting in there where you don't do it on a buy here, pay here store. You may have more hard packs on your cars, on your inventory, maybe for wholesale reserves and different things like that you may not have on a buy here, pay here store, because you don't have to worry about that. You may need to, like Joe said, train your sales managers and your desking people to structure the deal correctly and have all the information in the deal packet for getting the deal done and bought automatically on the system. Because if not, your office manager is going to be bringing that deal back to you and saying, we're missing a step, we're missing this, we're missing that. I don't have my money yet. And like Joe said, if you want to get your money in 24 to 48 hours, you better have your act together and have everything in that car deal jacket. What we recommend you do is get an F&I checklist or deal checklist that says, here's a list of everything I have to have in this car deal jacket, starting with the salesperson to the F&I person to the desk manager, all the way to the accounting department. And everybody signs off on that. That way you don't miss a beat on getting paid and getting your money right away.
Yeah, we would staple those to the front of the deal jackets when we were slow, and it was always on the cover there, and checklist them off. Dave, to that point, what about closing out at the end of the year? So if you're a buy here, pay here operator and you're closing out at the end of the year, are there some nuances, some differences if you're bleeding into some subprime that may be worth mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, what you may want to do if you've got taxable income, you may look at doing a used car write-down of your inventory, which a lot of buy here payers, some do and some don't. You normally don't need the expense on the dealership on a buy here, pay here store, but you may need it on a retail where you have extra income in your dealership, you want to get rid of it. So you can do an election on your tax return to go from cost method to lower of cost or market. And by filing a Form 3115 changing accounting method, you have to file that form with your tax return or before you file your tax return and get it approved. If you do that, you can write down your inventory at year end using NADA, Black Book, Manheim, or something like that. You have to keep that book or that Manheim printout in that deal jacket to justify to the IRS that you just didn't use seat of the pants. You used an actual approved book that they use and look at themselves. That's one thing. The other thing you want to do is we look at the vehicle receivables and stuff quite a bit at year end, and these down payments where you may be structuring a subprime deal and you're doing in effect a pickup payment on the deal, and you have to watch that because if you tell your lender that you've got $1,000 down and you took a $1,000 hold check, technically that's a violation of that contract, just so you guys know. A hold check, if you tell the lender you took this much money and you got a hold check, you really didn't take that much money at that point in time. So we've had dealers that have had to buy back contracts because they actually ended up repoing that car and they interviewed the customer and found out that, hey, I didn't give him $500 down, I only gave him $200 down, and I still owe him $300, which I probably can't pay him. Well, the lender will make the dealer buy back that contract, and that's not a good situation to be in.
No, and we've unfortunately seen a few situations out there because many of the dealer agreements will say we have the right to make you buy your entire portfolio back if there's fraud involved, not just a deal. It could wipe you out.
Is there another convention that focuses on this? I mean, this has been good, but I've been going to the buy here, pay here convention. I have 2 buy here, pay here lots, and I have a retail lot. Joe? I think I need a convention that focuses on the retail lot.
We got one.
Yeah. Yeah, we have NIADA. Have you been to the NIADA convention?
I've been to NABD. This is my 3rd one. Yeah. I come every other year. Yeah.
So I just throw out, we've got NIADA convention annually, which is retail, which caters to retail and buy here, pay here, and lease here, pay here. But there's certainly a.
That's the one that's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up next. Yeah.
So that's different than just buy here, pay here.
Buy here, pay here is a subset of it.
But we feel strongly enough about buy here, pay here that we have our own show for that. But the retail and like I said, you can, the attendance is 3 to 4 times as big. The expo hall is 3 to 4 times big because it encompasses prime retail through subprime down to buy here and lease here, pay here, and even wholesale.
And banks represented, things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you do, and I'm going to plug my my protege here, if you do need individual training or that's what they do as well. They can give you one-on-one.
Well, I signed up for the 20 group, but I'm kind of torn with that too, because it's a buy here, pay here focused 20 group. It seems too big, but I do 2/3
Yeah.
retail, 2/3 buy here, pay here, 1/3.
Yeah, so I would tell you, and Joe can even attest to, he's actually in the oldest 20 group for independent dealers that there is.
I'm the oldest person.
And he's the oldest guy in there.
I'm old too, because I spoke to those group the first time, so.
That's right. But even his group, which is a retail group. What percent of those dealers do buy here, pay here? A third?
Probably 3rd.
Yeah, so.
And then we all do subprime.
Yep. Yeah. Or you can do what we really love, which is be in 2. I've got lots of dealers in 2 and 3 groups.
We've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah.
I have a question on going back to pricing. I always get confused on the pricing strategy. Sure. On a buy here, pay here pricing, we control the pricing, and we control the gross profit, and we can easily calculate what the gross profit percent is of the sale. On a subprime deal, you've lost control of the pricing from the standpoint the lender's going to tell you the maximum you can go up to. So when I'm sitting there looking at, let's just say I take my portfolios and I look at my buy here, pay here's, and my average gross is 47%, or let's just pick a number and say my average gross is $4,200. And I go over here and I make a spreadsheet of my subprimes, and my average gross is $2,900. So now tell me how that's not 2-tiered pricing. if all my subprimes average 29 and my buy here payers average 42?
Because what you're,
I've got a bank and I've got examiners coming in to look at all these contracts and look at all these numbers. Tell me how that's not two-tiered pricing, because I don't get that. I mean, I'm looking at 42 to 29.
Yeah, the thing that your gross profit, the thing about your gross profit in your buy here, pay here deal is how many months of servicing do you have associated with that deal?
They don't care about that.
here's the way I look at it, and fortunately, I haven't been in a position being formally audited in that venue that you're talking about. But my position has been is that we have the fair and consistent pricing up front. Now, if a bank, if the bank tells me what they'll loan on that car, a third-party bank that goes through their own CFPB audits, and they tell me what they're going to loan on that car, it's the decision of the consumer and me, the two parties in the transaction, whether or not we want to sell the car at that price. Because we have a third party that's telling us, this is what we will advance on this car. So it's...
But I would bet if I took your numbers, because I've taken my
Sure.
numbers from a long time ago.
Sure.
They come out that way. And if you have an examiner in there auditing, we get that once a year whether we want it or not, because we're a registered bank, related finance.
You're in the, yeah, I come under the Banking and Finance Commission.
They do look at
Yeah.
contracts.
And we have had, and there have been cases, and there's been CFPB cases, and one of the things that we didn't get into today is that there's some safe harbor methods that you can employ to get around that saying, here's, so the first one is you can actually shift to a leasing model on your captives. My ex-partner, who does about $700 a month, does exactly that. His captives are all leases. Second one, which I've just helped a dealer in Knoxville, Tennessee do, is he bought the property next door. He put a new sign up under a new company, and they do retail.
No, I get you there. Separate location, separate deal.
That's a really...
I don't really want to...
I understand. And then you have to say, like, do I really want to do that? Yeah.
That's a good point, valid point.
I see the leasing up as an opportunity. Yep. I don't, Joe, you guys do a great job, but I can't do your deal.
That's something, again, that and that's the beauty of this convention, is that you can go and explore and try and decide what's right for you. And again, what state are you from?
North Dakota.
Okay. In Colorado, are you being, the regulators, are those state regulators or, yeah? And
we have the same thing in South Dakota. We've had multiple locations.
Sure.
Right.
They just come and, you pay them time and mileage and they get your place, tear all your stuff out and get done and
Sure.
come back and tell you what you liked and didn't like, and see you next year.
Yep.
I hate to cut in, but we're out of time, and hopefully we can continue this conversation
Yep,
perhaps
please.
at a sidebar, but I've got to get ready for the next session. Hey, let's give a lot of great stuff. Let's give these guys a hand. It's good stuff.